Sure. So, Rishabh, we looked through the document and we looked through the values, per se. So there were, what we again went back to the Bloom's taxonomy, and we are looking at the three levels. One is remembering the values, understanding the values, and applying the values. So this is how we have split the entire, learning exercise, right? Where, for example, the remembering would be the part where we will train people on what the values are. For example, if the value is inclusivity, which is one of your values, then we will actually train them on what inclusion is all about. Then we will give them small little, I'll just show you how the game flow works. We will next at the understanding layer, we will help them understand the entire logic of the values in relationship to the multiple stakeholders, right? So when I'm talking about inclusion, what does it mean, for a customer? What does it mean for a peer group that I'm working with? What does it mean to, my management and shareholders and stakeholders? So how does, that particular value translate to multiple, stakeholders within the organization? So that is where the understanding concept comes. And the third level is applying the entire, concept, right? So this is how we have split the entire thing. So the first value is, remembering, the core value. So here what we would do is, because we are any which ways looking at a complete 3D space, we will, during, our conversations with the non-playing characters, or, be it your, digital wall or any of the other interaction levels. For example, engaging with openness, if that's one of the core value. I think somebody else, my colleague, has also come.
Hi, Vinay. Okay.
Hey, hi, Vinay.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, hi. So here what happens is, we first look at the entire learning component, and we expose them to each of the values. So that is the first stage of the entire process. The second stage, so the first stage is where you could actually train people on the values through multiple interaction levels, which is, it could be an NPC interactions, it could be a collectible knowledge snippet that we spawn across the entire 3D space. It will be a 3D environmental puzzle that we will create. We will have a digital wall interaction where people could go and then go to a digital wall, and we will have, let us say, your leaders speak about that particular value, right? We could record each of the leader talking about one single value, and people will go to a particular value and then learn more about that particular value. And then finally we will have assessments and pulse surveys to understand how well they have remembered the values that are there. So the 5 values where people go and then learn those values through these interactables. Post that, what happens is, once the player has completed learning about the value, the next stage will enable them to apply, analyze, and evaluate each of whatever they have learned. So this is where we would go ahead and then start creating multiple scenario based workflow. What happens is, the player now plays the role of more like a Sherlock Holmes in the game. So let's assume that I would need to learn the value about inclusion. Now what could happen is, there would be an incident in office, right? And that particular incident, today needs to be, unearthed, or you would need to really investigate to find out what really transpired. It could be a simple incident where, my own co-worker or a colleague of mine who used to be regular to office, but suddenly, this women employee doesn't seem to be coming to office, and she has lost her interest. So this is the first notification that the player would actually get. Now what happens is, since it's my own colleague, as an employee, I would need to be interested to understand what really transpired. So this will follow the model of Sherlock Holmes, where I would now go ahead and then investigate. When I mean investigate, it would mean that I would go ahead and then talk to various people in the office for me to understand. So this is where, for example, I could go and then talk to somebody. I could go and talk to this colleague's friend. It could be my own manager, because each of them are going to give me a clue to what really has actually transpired. So some of them will give me half truth, some of them will give me a complete lie, some of them will tell me what really could have transpired, so on and so forth. So what happens is they would go through this entire journey where, for example, now I could go and then talk to this particular person and I could have a disposition. So here what we will have is a interesting camera angle, like a movie cut scene where it would be between two people who are conversing with each other. And now depending upon the information gathered by the player now would need to go ahead and then piece all the information together to find out what really has taken place, right? So this is where each of the values, for example, if it is about inclusion, we talk about inclusion. If the value is about engaging with openness, now again this is a behavioral disposition that needs to be brought in. So we go ahead and then talk about how do you really engage with openness, but we bring in scenarios which are very contextual and relevant from a public sapient standpoint. So what would happen is in the values document you have also given us a quote at the end of each of the values as to what it actually represents from a public sapient point. So in that particular case, what we do is to take that and then elaborate that into a form of a story and then create a Sherlock Holmes investigative format kind of a story. So I could show you an example of how that actually looks like. So we have
I would just want, this idea is very exciting. I would just want to see how are you executing it.
Sure.
Into India.
Sure. So I will show you the one that we are currently
and if we can just is this being recorded?
Yeah, this is being recorded.
Okay.
Just give me a second. Let me see if I have access to this one, please. Okay. So I'm showing you a 2D version of this particular framework. So today what we're doing is to have this for our diversity and inclusion, our POSH related training for various clients of ours. But we thought that this would be a very interesting model for this particular game as well. So here, for example, I go select my avatar. So here each of your values will now be a scenario, and this is a framework where typically what happens is values are something that people need to imbibe, and if I would need to imbibe, I would need to actually look at it from multiple dimensions and multiple people's point of view. So what could also happen is, rather than it being a one-time exercise, we could follow a Netflix model of learning where every month you will have a new scenario about a particular value actually come up. So for example, today with Aditya Birla and Giant Eagle and a couple of our clients, what we do is every month we launch a particular scenario, and that scenario is a quick 10-minute learning nugget, right? So here, for example, if I get into truckers' troubles, so this is the first notification that I was talking to you about, but imagine all of this is now coming in the 3D space. I'm going to unmute myself.
Warehouse and is really good at it. You and Celine catch the bus together to work each morning. Celine is usually chatty during your bus rides, but she's been quiet lately and often looks upset. You try asking her if things are okay, and she says she is fine. Celine was not on the bus today, which makes you concerned. You have decided to ask around to find out if anything happened. It's time to head to the warehouse and start your shift.
So this is where we actually, get them to the overall workplace. So now, the first thing is I could go and then speak to Luke. So here what I do in the 2D space is to go ahead and then speak to Luke. And then Luke would tell me, his version of the story of what really transpired.
Have you heard from Celine today?
I'm just going to mute, so that you could hear me speak. So here, this is a 2D version of the entire angle. But what, we would do is to completely make that, because the primary game that we are looking at is 3D. So we will actually convert this entire thing into a camera angle where, two people are speaking, and you will be able to ask more questions and understand what really transpired, to that particular individual. But the most important thing is, what's going to come next, where once I've understood what, really as transpired, I would now need to make my own inferences as what happened. So this is where I reason and reflect, because values are all about, me reasoning and reflecting on, each of these, statements of what it means to me, right?
Yeah.
So here what happens is, this is the entire journey map. So now I go ahead and then, for example, look at the causation of what really transpired, right? Is it about Luke's observation is right, something might be bothering her, or it's been busy couple of weeks, Celine's probably just too busy, to chat, and that is one of the reasons why she's not coming in, right?
Understood.
So depending upon, the path that I choose, my next set of, inferences and path, should be there, right? So here I could feel that maybe Luke is, reading too much, he's probably exaggerating things, or it might be Luke might be right? Max jokes on something, could cross the line. If that's the case, then what really transpires? So then Luke gives me another, information that, hey, I would now need to go and speak to Mira, right, who might have another piece of information, right?
Yeah.
So likewise, what happens, each of the values is where, we get to meet people, talk to them, and then understand of what, core values that needs to be, kind of imbibed and upheld, right? So because, for example, today, in the news we have, some disturbing news about TCS, in terms of, the ethics issue of people, taking about bribes for jobs. So now, what would happen is, people might think it's just okay, it's just a small little favor, so on and so forth. But, how do you really change that particular mindset? It's where you, rather than you giving them a gyan, or rather than you preaching about each of the values, now what we let them do is to actually practically apply them in the day-to-day work life. And then, for them to actually deduce and then reason and reflect, right? So, once I do this, now this is what we call as the investigation stage. So this game of 10 minutes has close to about 6 stages. So first is investigation, then it goes into deduction. After deduction, I would have a flashback of what happened. Then I have a reasoning stage where I would need to reason and understand why, this happened in the first place. Then I have a confrontation stage, and then I have a resolution stage. So every simple small scenario will go through these, 6 or 7 stages, and, we would be in a position to now, actually take them through, this before they, complete or learn about the values. So what Giant Eagle has done is, at the end of every scenario, they have, both as an intro and an outro, they have recorded the video of their CEOs and leaders. So at the end of every scenario, you would have, a particular leader coming and then emphasizing that particular value, which is to say, hey, now that you have seen, how Celine is impacted, now it is, about us in our own work life, how do we, so then people love good stories, people will be in a position to relate to it. And then people should be in a position to, clearly understand and articulate, about each of these values. So this is the overall concept, that we have. So let me go back to the concept note. So once I learn, and we go into the application layer, and where, for example, I could cooperate, I could, be pretty reluctant, about what is happening. So whatever are the emotions, whatever are the, typical, behavioral traits that happen, between two individuals, we bring that, into the game, and then we follow a complete investigative format. So this is one of the thought process we have. The second thought process is if you don't want a complex, mechanic like because this is something that we felt it was, a lot more effective, because all our clients who have played the game, they have come back and said that, hey, this really helps me reason and reflect. Because in experiential learning, if you look at the David Kolb's model, the most important thing is to help people reason and reflect and make them take a pause, to understand. So this is like me watching a movie, but also being a participant, in that entire movie, determining how the outcome is going to be. Right. So that is why I would, stop, pause, reason and reflect before I move ahead. So that's the overall concept. The second, if you would want a more simpler concept, we have the standard treasure hunt, value game kind of a model, that is there. But we would recommend, more of this, where this is far more serious and more, tuned to learning than a standard treasure hunt, kind of a model.
Right. What? No, do you have that in hand right now?
Yeah.
Second one.
So I could show you a quick video of how that works. Just give me a second. So this is how, for example, for another client of ours, we replicate that entire environment of theirs. And I was, telling you how, we will first do the learning component. So let me show you here. What could happen is, I could actually make them walk through, let's say, a public Sapient, office, and take them to a particular, spot where they would now, have an interesting view and learning about the values, and there is somebody who's explaining how the values actually come. So this is the first phase that I was talking to you about, which is the learning phase. The next phase is where I take them to a completely different island kind of a setup, where now the entire premise is for them to unlock each of the values, for them to exit this particular island and then come back to office. So that's the premise. So this is more like a island treasure hunt game. I mean, one of those Dwayne Johnson kind of a movie that you would have seen, where now you take them to a virtual island kind of a space where you let them participate. So here you could, let me just rewind or forward, sorry. Okay, so this is where I could move from one island to another island, right? And each of these islands would be named as per your values. So it would have each island will be a themed island, and based on your values, they would be in a position to move from one space to another space. So these are the two concepts that we have. One is a full-fledged investigative based concept, which is immersive and a little bit more what do I say, you are completely into the entire story. And the second one is a treasure hunt based model, where each of the islands will represent your values, and they go into that particular value. They will need to uncover the values, solve for mysteries in that particular island to understand more about the values in detail before they move into the next island. So this is how the concept actually works.
Okay. I think this is very, very exciting and quite detailed. And we were just thinking that there are 4 different phases of actually imbibing core values within an individual. That is, first of all, being aware.
Right.
That whatever you told would be written on a wall or probably onto a snippet or somebody just discussing. And the other one is understanding.
Right.
Yes, you are aware, you have read about it, but do you understand how to implement it? The third one is action. You have understood it, probably now is the state to implement it. And the fourth one is maybe sustaining it.
Correct.
And probably this is one concept in which the first 3 are already getting covered.
True.
And probably might act as a symbol of sustaining it as well. So I think the idea is really wonderful.
True. And sustaining is where you could actually have, Rishabh, like what I had mentioned, the Netflix model, where at a frequent point in time, depending upon the frequency that you choose, once in 3 months or once in a month, you have a small simple snippet which allows them to go and then practice their values, or refresh their memories on values and imbibe those as they progress.
Correct. One quick question here. If we would want to make use of AI, can we do that? Because you told me a 3D model.
Correct.
You said that it can be done into a 2D model. It told me that it can be converted into a 3D one as well.
Correct.
However, if we would want to make use of AI here, would that also be possible? Because even if it's a 3D conversation, no doubt it's a nice way of implementing it, but probably if there's a concept of having live conversations, would that also be possible anywhere?
No. So when you mean a live conversation, are you talking about like a bot where I enter my own text and the virtual avatar, kind of speaks out, based on the text that you're entering? Is that the one that you're talking about? Or when
yes, similar to what we do in ChatGPT, that's one. Or if
Correct.
or second one is even if we are speaking something, maybe he just takes out the keywords and then responds.
That's possible. So what?
That's possible.
Interestingly, what we did was to do a quick POC where we pass on the information to ChatGPT. Let's assume that I asked ChatGPT, what is who's the first person who went to the moon, right? I mean, let's assume that that's the question, and ChatGPT gives me an answer. But now, if I'm asking the same question to somebody and who is giving me or paraphrasing the answer, but is saying it in their own language and tone, what could happen is ChatGPT could, the AI could compare, both the intents, and then say that yes, the response from the player is pretty much matching with the overall intent of the answer, and it could also score saying that hey, the response from the player as compared to the standard option is a 8 on 10 or a 7 on 10 or a 6 on 10. So that would be possible.
Okay. Another question, Sandeep. When you had written engaging with openness, and then the journey of the player immediately started when you went up to have a chit chat with Luke.
Right.
Was it about one of our core values, or was it a generalistic, a discussion, and then it ended up into was it our core value only? Is something which I couldn't figure out at the end.
No. That's your core value. For example, the one in the PPT.
Inclusive or what?
Right. So this one, for example, is your core value, right? Engaging with openness.
This is done. Yeah, I've read it. But the other one was kind of fast forwarded, so I just wanted to check because it would help me in presenting that. So if the entire start from the end is related to our core value, probably I'll be able to illustrate that better to the reads.
Okay, so you're talking about the one in this particular game that I was showing you?
Yes.
Okay. So this one was, like what I'd said, this is, a game currently on, Posh. So, I mean, it would take a little bit more time. Yeah, because it would take a little bit more time for us to, write the entire narrative design and then make it, in line with, let us say, being open, because, that involves a lot more, narrative effort and carefully crafting, that particular journey, and then adding a little bit more mystery, into this entire section, right? So, for example, now if you see there is a flashback, that would come in. So here we actually zoom out and pan out and then tell them that this is a flashback, and then really take them to a cutscene, of how things happen. So if I'll have to do justice, then I would need to get these, images created. We would need to create that entire story, which is, which I'm afraid is a little time consuming, Rishabh. I mean, we just had a day's time to go through it, mull over, and then reflect on, possible options. But we didn't really have, because I didn't even know if this is a concept that you would, subscribe to. And that's the reason why we did not really put in, our efforts to creating something, closer to your values for today.
No, I think what you have brought is quite amazing. I have no doubts in that. But no worries, I'll create a story on my own and then probably present it to the leaders. But however, the concept is quite exciting. I think this is a nice one. I would be really glad if you share a recording of this with me.
Sure.
So that I can work upon it and design as per our core values, and then probably have a presentation.
Absolutely.
Avleen, you have any questions?
Not on this, Rishabh. I was just checking the video that we were seeing. Can we get that video, the 6-minute one?
Yes. We'll be getting the entire recording.
Achha. So there was one video, no?
Yeah. So Avleen, are you talking about this video that I?
The second concept which you just said is on the second one.
Yeah. So this one, right? Yeah, I could send this across.
This is on YouTube. Okay.
Sure.
We would want to have everything which we discussed today, Sandeep.
Certainly.
And one quick question I had: how much of this is accessible? Right.
So I mean, I think Rishabh did ask me this question. So I think from an accessibility standpoint, for example, if there are people who are little, let us say slow learners, or people who have, difficulty in accessing the application, they're slow with controls and their motor movements, this is it'll work perfectly fine, because it's purely works at the speed in which they, move the avatars and they, interact. So it's not something, it's absolutely trigger driven, and it doesn't move without the user having made that particular choice. When it comes to, let us say, people with difficulty in viewing, right? For those, there are voice over today embedded in the game, but it needs a little bit of a tweak, because what we would also need to add is voiceover for the navigation as well, which is asking the avatars to move forward or left or right, or giving them specific instruction of what interaction that they would need to do. So those are voiceover commands that we would need to incorporate, which is currently not built in, but we don't see a challenge, and we should be able to bring that in. With regards to people having difficulty with different color palettes, and if they are color blind, we're still thinking, the contrast. Yeah, we could create an eye contrast version as well. So that is something that's doable, because I also have my narrative lead here, Vinay. So he tells me that we would be able to do that as well.
Great. I think glad to hear that, because each and every email that goes out within our company, also everything needs to be accessible, compliant.
Okay.
So just wanted to check on that front, because that will be the first question that we'll get, Rishabh.
Sure. So one thing is, like, as we speak, I would say we are still maybe 3 or 4 on 10, but given the technology and the other changes that we are specifically working on, I think we should be able to comply with the accessibility norms as well.
Sure.
Also, Sandeep, I got to know something about the budget from Shikha. However, if you would want to add something to it, considering accessibility, considering the game which we are forming, how much additional cost would it require? I think that would also be a major point of discussion in the call today. So if you could just give a ballpark number, just
Rishabh, for example, right now the only challenge that I see is, because the cost that I gave to Shika was in the initial phases, right? But now after that we have not finalized the scope in terms of, are we having a VR element to it? There was this chatbot integration of Amigo that needs to be built in. So there are many elements of the scope that we would need to finalize, because if I give you a number right now, it's not even going to be an appropriate value, because the scope is still not completely finalized. And what I gave as a cost initially was for the standard onboarding piece. But now, if let's assume that we are talking about an Amigo integration, we would need to find out what is the scope of that. How are we going to integrate that? Again, in spaces where you did mention that we would want AI integration, similar to what we spoke in terms of a chatbot. What kind of integrations do you need? What kind of experiences do you need? Again, we spoke about VR, as well. So what is that going to be? Similarly, in the values game, we said, okay, you could have a scenario based one. Are we talking about just one scenario for one value? Or there is this concept of an entire treasure hunt game that we spoke about. So the scope is still fairly open. Right now, I think what we have been able to present to you is our capability, our ability to understand your requirements, and more importantly, our ability to translate your vision into an immersive game, going forward, right? But specifically with regards to commercials, Rishabh, for both of us, I would, for both of us to be on the safer side, it will be better if we have another call to discuss the scope in far more detailed length, and then, for us to submit a commercial proposal.
Okay, fair enough. One quick question, last one probably from my side, and I would like your understanding on the same. What is augmented reality, and is it nice if we implement that? Like, is it a recommended one, a recommended idea? And if yes, then how can it help us?
Right.
Like, so something which we are already thinking of. How is augmented reality going to help us?
Yeah. So augmented reality is, interesting, right? I mean, Vinay, would you want to add, and then I could, come in? Yeah.
Hi everyone. So I would say that augmented reality is useful if you want to, if you want people to explore physical space and also layer experiences on top of that. Like if you want virtual avatars to show up in your office while people are using an app to navigate around your real office space. If you want them to experience everything from their desk without moving around, without leaving, then VR is the more immersive option, or just a normal 3D or 2D environment game would be more ideal.
Yeah, and just to add to what Vinay is saying, my view is, currently, for example, the use case that we are currently working on, I see maybe very minimal use case for a AR. I mean, we could force fit an AR, but is there a very natural case, for us to build something on an AR? Today I'm not able to really fathom, what that could be. For example, what could be interesting is, for example, it's largely used in the medical, world, right? So, for example, I've not seen a heart, but can I now layer a heart just in front of me and then see it functioning and see how, the entire heart, works, so on and so forth, right? Or similarly, I might have not seen a rare creature like a dinosaur, but can I now augment the dinosaur, on my own table, as I sit right here, and then just have a look at a 3D dinosaur, look at its action, look at what it does, right? Without wearing a glass, without even moving my hands within the app, right? So those are certain interesting cases. But in our case, like what Vinay said, we could, because we are looking at an office space. If, for example, you would want to augment the CEO's corner office, right? That is something that you could do, right? So where you could bring in CEO and his office onto my desk, right? And I could have everybody actually have an interesting interaction with the CEO as he moves, as he speaks, or as he goes about, let us say, implementing the values of the organization, right? So that could be an interesting use case, because I'm not going to meet the CEO quite often. He's not going to be accessible to every single employee, but now augmenting CEO and in the space where I could sit in my own desk and then view what he does and his own actions. So that could be an interesting viewpoint to come to think of.
Understood. That's pretty much it from my side.